No, it's funny. I was kind of hoping like today's topic would just be like a lighthearted, trivial thing, and then like Tyler's like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna talk about like generational differences." I was like, "Oh shit." I was like, "Okay, we're gonna be here for a while."
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Real Talk with Our Stories, Your Legacy. This week, we are going to continue with just, popping out random questions, talking about random things, because that's what we do. We like to have conversations with our friends, our brothers, and just kind of dive deep into these things that, maybe you don't think about all the time, or maybe you do. Who knows? So today, we're going to be talking about generational differences. Just kind of a big topic as of, well, maybe not as of recently, but I think it's one of those topics that we see a lot more with folks growing up right now, and even our generation. You got boomers and zoomers and Gen Zers and all that stuff. There's just differences in generations, and we just wanted to bring it to light. Actually, this was a prompt that was sent to us as something that one of our listeners suggested that they wanted to hear us talk about. So we're kind of implementing that. Someone actually sent us a question to kind of look at and kind of like dive deeper into. So that's what we're going to do today. But before we get started, we're going to go around the table, check in with the people that are here, just so that you know who is here. If you are listening, via podcast and not watching the video. So we'll go around the table. Steven, how you doing?
What is up, Tyler? Doing good, man. As for our listeners, we will always record this the Monday following the Sunday that gets posted. And so, again, just maybe so here in the Pacific Northwest, we've just been having a little crazy rain snowstorm now, or sorry, snowstorm's over, but rain, some wind. And, it's kind of peaceful, but then it's kind of making the day feel a little overly cozy, which makes you feel a little too comfortable. So kind of like what Tyler and I were talking before we started recording, it was like, if I was to look back on my day right now, I was pretty productive, but I just felt like I could have done more. So it's kind of like a lose-lose situation where, or a non-win situation where I felt like if I look back, I've done a lot, but then I feel like maybe I should have done more. Maybe it's just a case of the Mondays trick in my mind. But overall, I'm pretty good. I'm back at it. Enjoy being here with the brothers and having a great conversation. And I didn't know that that today's topic was by one of our listeners. And so I'm excited to dive deeper into the questions they have, and hopefully they can chime in some more, or at least provide some feedback on our answers today. And again, just like for everyone listening, there's never a right or wrong answer. It's just all of us just sharing our personal experience, our stories, right? So thanks, Tyler.
Yeah, of course, man. Thanks for that. Zavon, how you doing, man? It's been a couple weeks since we heard you.
Yeah, just been finishing a lot of projects, grinding out a lot of personal things, but glad to be back. You know how it is, though. Same shit every day. So just taking it day by day, doing the.
We miss you, man. But we know life comes in waves, and so we're excited to have you back whenever we can.
Glad to be back.
100%. How about you, Tyler? How's your day going?
Oh, it's going well, man. I mean, you kind of summed it up. Monday feels like the Monday. Only nice thing. I don't know. Today I felt like I was very productive, but not productive at the same time. It just random stuff kept popping up in my email and all that stuff. So, it is what it is. It is what it is. But it's a short week for me. It's Allie's birthday this week on Thursday. So we're going to take some time off and kind of just drive down the coast and, get away for a little bit, get away from computer screens and all of that, just to, freshen up, and really just get away, you know, unwind a little bit, even though we're in a car. But hey, it's the spontaneity that we're missing, so, or spontaneity. I don't know why. Anyways, you know what I mean. Just trying to get out. So that's kind of how my day's going. Only have to get through 2 days more this week, taking Thursday, Friday off. Cool.
Nice. I have a whole week, but lucky you. We'll keep checking on for you.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things. It's everyone needs and deserves some time off. Even if we are working from home, it's still very draining.
Right.
Just kind of getting out, And we're not trying to do anything crazy. We're going to be in a car most of the time.
Right.
It's just getting out of the norm, I guess.
Right.
The pandemic COVID norm nowadays. So with that said, we're going to hop right into this topic. Like I said in the intro here, we are going on this question based off of a, random tip, or not really tip, but a question that was sent to us by one of our listeners. Thank you again for sending that in. Basically, what they wanted to talk about, or wanted to hear us talk about, is just what the generational differences kind of look like for us compared to our parents. And I know, obviously, this is based off of our experiences alone, the three of us here. I can give some examples of stuff that they provided us, and then kind of speak generally of things that I hear people complain about all the time. So that's kind of the direction we're going to go in. Obviously, there's no right answer here. There's no wrong answer here. This might not be your situation at home, but you never know. It could be. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, that makes sense, cool. But we're just going to hop into it. I think one of the biggest things with the generations that we see nowadays is just kind of the expectations versus the reality of things. Comparing our lives to maybe our parents' lives and what they kind of expect from us, or what they expected of us, but then where we're at in reality is not maybe what they were thinking at all. I.e., huge example, I think growing up, we're taught that it is, usual to get married around 25, 24. You kind of grow up knowing this, but you only know this because this is what your parents kind of taught you. I speak very generally. Maybe not everyone expected you to be married at 25, but most parents, at least from our generation, I feel like, obviously they're not the boomers. They're kind of that Gen X that is in the middle there. And they, kind of have both things. So they learned from the boomer era and generation, but with them, it was kind of like hey, let's get married at, early to mid 20s, have a kid, mid 20s to early 30s, if you're not married earlier. So I think kind of growing up, it was not necessarily pressured, but it was kind of an idea for like our generation, like, okay, maybe we'll get married by 23, 24. We'll have a kid by 25, 26. And because that's the way it is, or that's the way it's kind of portrayed to us as we were growing up. But obviously, the three of us, we're in positions where we're not married. We've passed the prime age of 23, of 24. And we're not married. We don't have kids, at least that we know of, that I can think of anyways. But, it's one of those things. I don't know if parents have kind of gotten to a point where they've just, I don't know, are they upset? Are they kind of like disappointed that we're not married at that point? Or are they kind of just accepting the facts as they are, just because they realize that the generation is going to be different now? For some parents, I think it's a little bit easier to accept that than others. So that's just kind of one of the examples that they were given, one of the other examples they provided for us is kind of the situation or expectations on living with your partner before marriage. So I think that's one of the biggest things that they brought to our attention was like, are you living with a roommate? Are you living with, your significant other? Is your significant other at that point more than a roommate? In a very traditional sense, I would say that a lot of the older generation came from a time and place where you didn't really move in with your partner until you were married. And I think that's a very kind of standard view on it. It's a very traditional view on living together with your partner. So I don't know. I think that's kind of a big one. I think that rubs heads or causes some friction between a parent and their child, especially if they move in and do all that. I think it's just a little bit different nowadays. I'm going to pose the question. What do you guys think of kind of the expectations versus reality, kind of using those two examples, for instance, and kind of seeing like, what are your experiences with expectation versus reality? And, what did your parents expect from you versus where you're at now? Or were they very supportive? Obviously it depends on where you came from as a family as well. Single parent home versus, two parents, or maybe it's two parents that fight all the time. Who knows? I think it all depends, but what's your guys' experience with that? Either of you can jump in.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's a lot to explore, but it's something fun to explore because you get to reflect on your life and your parents' life. I like to say, the older we get, especially for me, the older I got, the closer I got with my parents, and the more I realized I want to spend, the rest of my time as much as I can with them because I value where they come from a lot. Some of my favorite pastime right now, every time I see my parents for dinner, um, um, is to always ask them about their upbringing, because as most of our parents are, especially my parents, they were immigrants. So, they immigrated from Asia to come here, and it wasn't it wasn't the prettiest, So, my parents are both Southeast Asian, and they actually, um, didn't know each other back in the country. They both were very young, like, 17, 18 teenagers, you know, just teenagers who had to become refugees to escape the Vietnam War, and just basically leave their country to make a life for themselves. That's where, so they actually met serendipitously, in the Pacific Northwest, which is pretty awesome. But to hear that story, it's like, man, we grew up privileged, not saying that our lives and what we went through is not hard in our own generation, but talking about the realities of two different things. We all grew up differently. And so, speaking generally, I could see how parents, especially parents like mine who are immigrants, can be definitely a hard ass and like, sticking true to like old traditional values and whatnot. Because my parents were definitely like that. I think me being the oldest of two total siblings, just me and my little brother, my parents, sheltered me a lot and expected a lot out of me originally. It wasn't until college where they realized that, I was going to be okay, because they've seen kids through their eyes. They've seen kids from growing up to senior year of high school, anywhere in between, had the ability or not had the chance to, steer off the wrong course per se, right? And so, they sheltered me really hard. But being traditional Asian parents, and traditional American dreams, they felt like when I get to college, or when I choose to get to college, is when they kind of step back a little bit because they're like, okay, he made the right decision. And as we know, me, you, and Zavon, and most of our friends, most people who have gone to college will admit that, college, once you get through it, it's not as all cracked up as it is, and we talked about this so many times in other podcasts and conversations with our friends. Not saying college is bad, but we're saying that, it's not the end all be all of like all successes, right? But to my mom and my parents, especially my mom, my dad was a little more forgiving, but with my mom, it was more of like, you got to get to college because, you have to make some of yourself, and that's the only way to do so. And so from a physicality perspective, just me physically being at university, she felt she could let off the gas a little bit and breathe a little easier, that I'm not going to steer wrong. But, so it, I struggled, but, I made it happen at the end. But, it wasn't as a straightforward ride. But her and I, my parents overall developed a trust where, she started realizing, she understood that, maybe she doesn't know everything in the world. Yes, she worked her ass off to become an immigrant and become a successful businesswoman and et cetera, and make it in American society where English is a second language. She really made a big success story of herself. But she realized that the world generation is changing, especially with her sons, and that, so we always have like heart-to-heart conversations or to talk about differences. And she, I would say, compared to other typical Asian stereotypical parents, she definitely felt like she realized, you know what? I see that my sons are in a good place, and I'm going to trust that though they probably are not where I typically originally envisioned them, but I see that they are successful in their own way, and I'm going to hear them out and trust that they can make it. I think that's a huge stereotypical shift. I used to hide things from my parents because I would think that they would be disappointed, or they would, typical stereotypical Asian, judgmental, things where, I'm scared that I'll let them know, yeah, I didn't get a 4.0 in that one quarter, and, typical stuff like that. But over time, I started to show them that, I was working hard and making something out of it. And they realized, you know what? That is definitely something that we all grown together. And they start to realize, you know what? I got to put a little faith in them, And so that kind of gives me, and I'll touch on a little more after the rest of you guys talk, but that kind of trickled into a lot of different things that broke down a lot of traditional barriers. For you guys, as you guys know, I'm not married yet, but I'm engaged, but I've already been living with my fiance. And even before that, her as a girlfriend before I proposed, we've been living together for, almost 4 years, and it kind of, as you mentioned earlier from our listener who provided a couple of topics to think about, it wasn't immediate, it took a lot of trust from my parents too, to trust my girlfriend, fiance, my partner, and realize, build rapport with her. But also at the same time, she realized, kind of like what I was telling the story earlier, she started to realize, generations is different. And I started to trust my sons or my kids now to make the right decision. And so that was the equivalent to as trusting that, it's not a totally unlucky or spiritually bad thing to have my kid already live with their partner before marriage. It's one of those things. I think over time, the more you build this rapport with your parents and talk, I think it breaks down barriers, because vice versa for me, I know my brother's still a little hard-headed about this, where he feels like he still has a lot to prove to my parents, and he doesn't see that they trust him. But, but for me, I'm at the point where I've accepted that they trust me, but at the same time, I don't want their story to go away when they're old. And I hope they both live to 100 and more, but as we all know, our parents get older every day, and it's sad. And it's like, the more I see that, the more I'm like, you guys already trust me enough. I have nothing to prove. All I want to do now is to hear your guys' story, and to continue to show how much I love you guys and how much you guys done for me in return. So, the old traditional values kind of come back, where I'm like, man, my parents done a lot for me, even though they were very tough on me, with just how they raised me, and how strict they were with me. And, I'm not even going to equate it to like typical stereotypical Asian parenting, but, it does fall under that category. So, so yeah, so in terms of that, to kind of answer our listener's question, is like talking about the getting married before mid-20s, it was kind of an element of the trust that my parents and I built. It wasn't its own, thing. It was part of it was a factor of all that. So that was one thing. And then kind of to answer the other question that they had, or the other prompt, like, I guess that was all the prompt, but, yeah, different generations, man. I'm not saying we're going to live longer, but I'm saying that things happen a little later for our lives as we probably expect, I'm going to touch on this a little later, but a couple points to reach out. I truly believe our generation, 30 is the new 20, so that means that a lot of stuff that typically happened for our parents' generation in their mid-20s, like getting married, like just the definition of settling down, was like in their 20s, because life kind of came at them quickly, Like I said, my parents had to become adults quickly when they were teenagers, shoot, like I can't imagine escaping the war and, and coming to a brand new country that expected different values, different speaking language, and building a success story out of it. So, they had to grow up quicker than we did. And I'm sure this is for all other families too, immigrants or not, they just had to grow up quicker. It's just different generation. Not saying we were babied a lot more, but I felt like we just have a different time frame of things, And so I think for our generation, 30 is the new 20. So come this 30, doesn't mean we have to, but come this 30 is when, we start to see what we start to do that our parents expected,
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point too with the, like your parents, immigrants and everything. For my family, it was my grandmothers that came from another country. So even back, further back a generation in that regard. So my parents grew up in the States, but not without heckling and all of that stuff, just because at that point, during that time when my grandmothers came over from Japan, that was World War II. No one really liked Japan at that point over here, just because they're, obviously they bombed Pearl Harbor, all of that stuff, whole world war on it. But, you kind of see it. My parents, they grew up in the States, so they had a little bit different experience, obviously, than your parents did. So, yeah, I mean, it's just kind of different where they came from as far as like if they were immigrants, all that stuff too. Obviously, you're going to, for the listeners, you're going to get a very kind of a spread view on kind of what ours are and what our ideas of our parents and everything, just because we are all Asian. We do come from an Asian background, so it might be a little biased in that regard, although it still will be a little bit different. Obviously their experiences, each of our families' experiences, etc. But this is definitely a topic I think that we can explore a little bit deeper with some of our other friends who might have a little bit different experience. Just a traditional, maybe a white family, or a black family, or even Hispanic family. All of that stuff that we would talk about with our other friends might be something to explore if this topic is actually something that kind of resonates with other people as well. Zavon, how was kind of, I guess we can just tackle this, maybe not as broadly, but what were expectations that of, like maybe your family, your parents, your mother, versus kind of with the reality of what things are now, and how maybe they cope with that, or maybe they are accepting of it and everything.
That's a very good topic. This is actually something I do think of like quite frequently, because like my mom and I were like, she's essentially a boomer. Like she's 63. She was born in 1957, and I'm a millennial, about to turn 27 in like 3 months. And it's so funny, when I was a kid, like really cheesy and whatnot, but when I was a kid, I always fantasized like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be married by like 27. I'm gonna have like my own house and whatnot, have a good paying job. I'm about to turn 27 in 3 months. I don't think that's gonna happen anytime soon, which is totally fine. I mean, that's just how the culture is, how society has changed and developed, because it's so dynamic here in America. As for like my mom and I, like our differences and what she wanted for me, it's funny because, so my mom, older generation, as I mentioned earlier, also an immigrant, came from the Philippines, came from a conservative Catholic family. So you can imagine, like, if folks are familiar with the Asian culture and the Catholic conservative background, you can imagine like how strict my mom was in regards to raising me. But the thing is, at least coming, or I don't want to say coming to terms, but at least like pondering about it over the years, like my mom and I, we see eye to eye on a lot of things. I hold a lot of convictions that like she aligns with, and it's not just because of how she raised me, but like for me as my own person, like I like hold a lot of like conservative traditional values in regards to like a relationship that my mom, like, she would be up for, and that she's on the same boat. She's on the same boat as me in regards to that. So like, but at the same time, she's not pushing me to get married. I have a lot of uh, family members, extended family members, especially from my mom's side, who always ask me, Zvon, do you have a girlfriend yet? Zvon, you married yet? This and that. Zvon, do you have a kid? Whatever. I'm like, no, I'm totally fine with that. And my mom, she's like 100% fine with that, because she's also aware of the culture we live in, like us millennials, Gen Z, like the younger generations live in. And like, again, eye to eye with my mom, we're both not a fan of like just like how the culture is here in regards to uh, myself specifically, and like what I want for a long-term partner. Like I'd love to get married and have a kid someday, but I'm not in a rush to do it. I'm not pressured by my mom to do so, because she understands very well like where I come from when I tell her that, and she hears a lot of stories from her friends and their kids who are the same age as me, and the shit they go through. Yeah, it's my mom and I, we're actually very alike. Something I've learned being quarantined at home, taking care of mom because of her like physical and health overall, we're actually very alike, like very alike. And in regards to the virtues, the values, and like what we see in regards to how we would run a family, or how we run a family, or how she has ran our family, and how I plan to run my family in the future, and what I want for my kids. So I would say I'm really conflated between the traditional conservative household as well as like a more like liberal individual. Like I'm not, like I said, I'm not in a rush to get married, but I'd love to. That's my ultimate goal. My goal is to have a long-term partner who I'm committed to. I don't like the idea of divorce. So, and I don't like the idea of like just hopping around, dating around, whatever. But whatever the folks do these days, that's on them. I just have different goals and values for myself. And there are other things in regards to like how my mom and I, we how like our relationship is, and how we see things. Like I also have an older brother and he's Gen X, and he's been like the, I guess I want to say the mediator, but the person in the middle, essentially, to help bridge the generational gap. So, um, yeah, there's that. I mean, I could go further into detail with my brother and I because we have a very close relationship. He's 19 years older than me, so he's like 45. And but the funny thing is, him and I, we treat each other like we're teenage brothers. Like his wife and our mom like has to like pull us apart because we're just that goofy together, which is an awesome relationship that my brother and I have. So I want to say, like, I want to bring awareness to like there are folks out there who do have like a lot of discrepancies between them and their like family, whether if it's immediate family or extended family, because of those generational gaps. And just for me thinking about it over the years and, you know, really maturing, I'd say I'm very lucky because although my mom is very strict and can be a pain in the ass, like 90% of the time, might even be 93%, we get along very well because of like the values. And it's not that she forced values on me. It's more of she raised my brother and I with all these values that we just carried on naturally, intrinsically, and it helped develop our character and our experiences. Speaking about my brother and I, specifically, like our experiences helped shape our values and helped us like strengthen who we are as individuals, our characters, our morals, and how we develop to who we are today and moving forward. So yes, we have a lot of disagreements in my household between my mom, my brother, and our mom. But at the end of the day, it's all from love, and we do come to like an understanding on like a lot of things, especially when it comes to like how we foresee a family. My brother, he's married, but he doesn't have a kid yet. So, and he's not in a rush to. Like him and I, my brother and I, we also have, with him being Gen X and me being a millennial, we also share the same values in regards to like financially settling first, and to really get to know someone before you propose to them and get married and really settle. Because obviously, like my brother and I, like him and his wife obviously are like the best example, and they are like the number one example I look to in regards to like settling with a partner, getting married and whatnot, thinking about your future financially and where you're going to be and whatnot, career wise. Shoot, I lost my train of thought. But I look to them as an example, and it's natural. It's not like forced upon. The only thing that was really forced upon me, I would say, is like my mom telling me to become a doctor, which, I mean, it sounds great. Sounds cool. Sounds fun. I mean, I still went to college, but the more, I guess, liberal side of me was like, I want to be whoever I want to be and whatnot. Go figure, I get a communications degree. I'm not the stereotypical Asian who's like good at math or is going to be a doctor, become a nurse, become a lawyer. Do I have regrets? Yeah, sometimes, but I mean, I finished college, so I'm just going down the path that I want, and that I making choices and then making it right for myself. But yeah, that was a mouthful. Completely lost my train of thought there, but I hope at least the viewer who asked this question specifically sees where I'm coming from.
That was good, Zavon. Yeah, you definitely can't choose. Like they always say, that cliche, you can't always choose family and whatnot. But yeah, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but you made a good point about bringing awareness to appreciate the family that you have that help you kind of develop and establish your convictions. Like, because I think kind of the same way you and I used to feel like resentment. I know that's probably a strong word, but to my parents, where I felt like, why are you holding me down? Sometimes just let me be free when I was younger. How come all these kids get to just party and do whatever they want, and whatever during like when we were like younger. And the older I got, the more I realized that I was more like my parents than the people who I thought I wanted to be growing up. Because in time, I started to realize, I didn't fully understand what they were instilling in me and why they were protecting me. And as I got older, I realized that it made so much sense, because like you brought up a good point about, because, the same with my parents, it's like you either be an engineer, doctor, or lawyer, typical stereotypical Asian stuff. Not because um, it was a fulfilling career, but because it was typically, money, money involved. Whatever brings money is what our typical stereotypical Asian parents was forcing us to do. And it's funny because the older I got, the more I realized, man, you know what? What my parents instilled in me, all that hard work and stuff, if I would have just learned what I know now, I think I could have been a doctor and whatnot. Because I don't know if I want to spend more time in school to be a doctor, but I definitely know. I mean, in my line of work, I'm not an engineer, but my line of work is related and technical in that sense. So I kind of met that goal already. But I wish I've pursued law, for example. I feel like I could be a good lawyer, um, knowing what I know now. But knowing what I know now was because of what my parents instilled in me, and so I appreciate them more and more for that. That that I know it's kind of a little off based on the question from our listener, because we're talking about the differences, but um, there are differences, but there's also a lot of overlap to what our parents or our family / extended family that we grew up with has taught us to weather our own generation, weather our own storm.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack here. This is a very deep question, and we can touch it based on its surface level, but there's definitely a lot to unpack on this particular question. I think Zavon made a very good point as far as what is being instilled in you as you are raised, all of that. Some parents, they only have one child. They might have two. Some have three, four, five. The crazy ones that have nine. I don't know how they do it. That's crazy. But to each their own. But it's just one of those things. Like, it's just how you're raised. It's one of those things that, like, yes, you mentioned, Stephen, like the resentment piece and like, why are you being harder on me, than all of my other friends. But it's one of those things we have to realize that, yes, they may seem like public enemy number one when it comes to certain things in growing up, even as an adult in your mid-20s. Your parents still going to school you in some fashion, or you might butt heads with them just because they're your parents. But the important message here is really just like, they do it out of love. It's not like they're trying to, like, zap the fun out of any decision that you make, or kind of like, parent you or mother you, or, do all that and basically say that you can't take care of yourself. You don't know what's best for you. It's like, okay, well, for instance, like Zavon or something, like, I'm 27. I think I have an idea of what the world looks like out there right now. And I think I'm okay with the direction I'm going in, like, I'm 30, I'm in the 30s now. It's just like, I can truthfully say that, yeah, my parents, I definitely see eye to eye with them on a lot of things. Growing up, there was definitely a lot of things that I did not see eye to eye with them. But it was just one of those things. Like, I don't think we ever got into super heated arguments. Maybe a couple times here and there. When I was brave enough to stand my ground, also one of those generational things. I think our generation was kind of the last generation where, like, your parents could literally strike fear into you with a belt or a shoe or whatever that might be, spanking, whatever that is. Nowadays, I feel like, you know, people can't do that anymore just because it's like, oh, you're abusing your child and all of that. So I don't know. In that regard, it goes way back to boomer and beyond, or beyond that even. Um, I was like, there's certain parts of discipline there that I think should still be around, but you know, throwing kids across the room, probably not the best idea. No. Giving them a smack on the back of the hand with a wooden spoon, absolutely. That'll teach you real quick. Trust me, I know. I got smacked with spoons on the back of my head, on my neck, on my hand. I mean, hey, it only takes once, and then you're like, okay, I probably shouldn't do that anymore. But I digress. Basically, yeah, it's just stuff, you know, it's all out of love. They're all looking out for you. That's really what it is. It's not like they're literally going against you and saying that you don't know what's best. At, you know, certain ages, they might know what's best, but not necessarily best for you. They're just trying to keep you from going into, I don't know, down the wayward path of, you know, their option A, B, C, and you're choosing F or something. You know, like, oh, did you consider that? But you know, when you're in a combative state as a teenager and growing up and stuff, you're gonna obviously not see eye to eye on that regard. You want to have fun, you want to do what your other friends are doing, but again, it just kind of depends on how you grew up. So I think there's so much to unpack on this question. I know we're basically just getting surface level, and I know we're just talking about kind of our experiences too, because you know it's interesting to hear just kind of our experiences right now, based off of with you know, growing up and doing all of that and seeing where our parents' expectations are and how they are kind of you know, as people say, woke now. You know, if we go back a generation even further, grandparents, obviously they're just more like, I'm proud of you, but that's all they can really say because they don't actually know what's happening in today's world as far as like certain jobs go. So that said, I think we really kind of dove in on that one. I'm going to kind of transition to maybe just like a quick, almost like a quick fire round kind of questions. There are a couple things that this listener also sent us as like kind of just small examples, maybe just to get our thoughts on. Not sure exactly they kind of give the examples, so maybe we can kind of just touch base on them very surface level real quick. And you know, if it's something that they want us to dive into a little bit deeper, we can definitely do that on another episode, just to kind of maybe dedicate a whole episode to it. Just who knows, this might resonate with just more than just the one listener, you know. So obviously we talked about being married by a certain age. I think that's just one of those things. Stephen, you made a good point with the 30s, the new 20, at least in this generation, the millennial generation. Because it's true. I mean, you kind of see a lot of us in this generation. Yeah, some get married, you know, 26, 27, but then there's some of us that are approaching 30 and, you know, we're either engaged or we're dating and maybe we're not, you know, to a point where we're ready for marriage and whatnot. I think it's funny because now you're seeing like the newest or younger generation, the ones that are coming up, you know, who are like just turning 21 right now. They're all getting married right out of high school. So it's kind of funny that like they're just repeating again. This goes to the whole like everything is a cycle, everything is, you know, hip at certain times. So I feel like this next upcoming generation, they're getting married younger than we are, but it's going back to, you know, boomer and all that stuff where they were married young. So we kind of touched base on the marriage question. I think there was another one we talked about, living with your partner before marriage. I think that's just for the perspective of that. My perspective on it, from basically how they asked the question, is obviously, I think in a traditional sense, it kind of takes that, what's the word I'm looking for here? In the traditional sense, it kind of takes the fun or the surprise or the specialness out of moving in with your significant other or your spouse once you get married, if you're living with them before you're married, right? It's just like, I think like, oh, that's like a rite of passage at that point, that you're now getting because you're married. So now you get to live with each other and kind of thing, which traditional sense, yes, absolutely makes sense. I agree with a lot of it. But at the same time, you know, my stance on it too is just like, while I respect it, and respect the view on it, and I understand the views, I think that obviously everything is evolving, right? I think if you trust one another enough, and I think if you know that you are meant to be together, um, it's kind of a trial at that point. I know people say that marriage is a trial in your life, but I think we've come to um, maybe a thought or even an understanding that don't you want to get the trials out of the way before committing your life to a marriage? You know what I'm saying? So like in my thought process, I'm thinking like when people get married, that's like, oh, it's the first time they're living together. They're learning things about each other now that they didn't know before getting married, even though they may have dated for 5, 6, 7 years or whatever. This is the first time they've lived together, and now they're learning like, oh man, this other person is a slob. They can't clean up after themselves. Oh my God, the tendencies that they have, I do not agree with, or they drive me bonkers. I don't know how I can stand this person. Yeah, you see it a lot actually, and a lot of times that actually ends in a divorce, and obviously you don't want that. Um, if you're thinking that this person is the one. So I mean, my personal stance on it, I know Stephen, you can probably talk to it a little bit more too, because you guys lived together for a few years before you got engaged, is that yeah, there's a big trust component there. And I think the big thing is like when you start living together, a little, before you're married and stuff, that's also, you're learning a lot about that person. And it's like, that kind of is another step in determining like, do I want to marry this person? Again, this is just our experiences, our thoughts on it. If you're very strict on the, I can't live with my partner or spouse before we're married kind of thing, that's totally cool. We get it. That's preference, but I think for us, at least my experience or my opinion on it, I think you learn a lot about a person by living with them. I think that's the biggest thing when going into a marriage is like, if you haven't done it before and then you're there and you maybe realize like, oh my God, we are complete opposites when we're living together. Because when we go out and hang out and do all that stuff, we get to only see the trying phase, I say, is like, oh, we can put forth our best effort when we're together, but then when we're at home, we can do our own thing. But when you guys are together, then at that point, it's like, oh my God, this person hasn't done dishes in 7 days in their sink and their living room and all that stuff. I can't handle it kind of thing. So,
Yeah, man. I mean, just my 2 cents with that. I agree too. I mean, I'll tell my experience in a bit, but to kind of parlay to what you said and to what Zavon said earlier about his brother and his sister-in-law, where it's like, for me personally, of this new generation, I have a very strong opinion about this. I really do. And I'm going to save it, the longer version, for another topic if we break it down more, but to keep it short and sweet, I personally am a strong advocate for being able to live with your significant other, if you want. The main thing is kind of like what Zavon said earlier with his brother and sister-in-law. And in my personal relationship, it's like the person that you're being committed to is a marriage, and obviously you don't want to get married to get divorced. That's never the goal. You want to I feel like getting married, it shouldn't be a trial period. Like, seriously, what the F does that even mean? When you're getting married, it should be you guys finalizing your commitment to each other. But how do you even know you'll be committed to each other? I feel like that is where just one factor. I'm not advocating that you need to live with your significant other, but what I mean is that, is this someone that you know that you're going to have a stable faith with each other, stable relationship, work with each other to have stable financials before you get married? Like, is this someone that you can trust, that you could trust enough where you can overlook them not good at doing dishes, like by being committed to this person? Do you know enough of them? Do you work solidly enough with each other? But sometimes you don't know that until you do live with somebody. But then again, I'm a believer of just making sure you get all the trials out of the way. It doesn't involve actually living with them, but it is a pretty, a good element too, to really know if this is the person you're committed to. But big picture wise, what I'm trying to say is, why are you even in a relationship? If you don't even know each other and you want to explore that when you get married. That's so backwards to me. Now you're going into a marriage, flipping a coin. Like, I kind of like them. I have this imaginary belief that they are going to be who I think they are. So, and then you get married and then you flip a coin because you're like, I hope what I'm thinking is true. That's not how it works. First of all, you're not marrying a doll. You're marrying another person who has their own beliefs, who come in with their own goals, their own mentality, and their own faith, blah, blah, blah. Before marriage is when you should be hashing that out. Do you guys mesh? You don't have to be a perfect 100% fit, but do you guys mesh? What they lack, you have the strength. What you lack, they have the strength. So this is more of a relationship question, topic that we can explore later on.
Yeah, right.
But for me, I'm a strong advocate that compared to our parents' generation, where you just get married, blind faith, I'm using this lightly, I'm joking, but the hippie generation where you just have this blind faith of jumping into something. I'm a little different. I'm a little more calculated. I think our generation overall is a little more calculated. Like, don't just jump into something and expect it all to work out. But that's my opinion.
Right.
I'm not right or wrong, but I'm right for myself because I think that works for my significant other and I, and we work. I'm the same way. I agree with a lot of what Zavon was saying about his brother and sister-in-law, where even now, as you guys know, I plan to get married in 2022, but my goal is to buy another real estate property first to solidify our investment so that if we focus on our financials in the future and investments and whatnot, then we can spend a little more freely on our wedding, worry free, that we don't have to worry about setting up our financials first, right? But even then, I'm like, weddings these days on average is not cheap. And so we're not trying to go over budget on our wedding. We're actually probably not spending as badly as, many others who are probably getting married. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's right for my partner and I. And that's why I feel like us agreeing on the same goals allows us to feel 100% right of being committed to a marriage, right? So I know that was longer than I said,
Right.
I'm saving the longer one for another time, but dang, imagine me going off on the longer one. But yeah, that's me. And that's kind of everything short wise about marriage, or about living before marriage and all that stuff,
Right. Yeah. And I mean, marriage is another topic in general too.
Right.
How big do you need the wedding? That's a big question nowadays too, Does it have to be extravagant where you're spending thousands and thousands of dollars, or can you just get away with a small one? Who knows?
Yeah. Let me actually, let me just in case Yvonne wants to say something, but one final point about that. You brought up a great point about the wedding. I always grew up to believe, or I always see from friends of friends or other friends where, especially in kind of like an Asian tradition, getting married is a huge event. It brings all the family together of both sides. And it's like a ceremonious way to connect and quite literally bridge, the gap between the two families. I always believe from my parents' generation that it has to be a huge show, right? You got to go big and like that. But here's the difference from my personal experience, is that my partner and I are paying everything out of pocket.
Mm-hmm.
And with us knowing about our future finances, we're not going to blow that much money that could be used for so many other things. Yes, we're probably spending a little more than we want, without going into the details, but we know that we can manage that debt. But it's not overly close to what the country average is, or even close to the just bottom line average. And I know my parents, we compromise on that, and this is just me communicating with them. I feel like over time we just grew better at communicating, and I just let them know, hey, I don't want to burden you guys with debt, so I don't want you guys to put anything in for it. I just want you guys to be there to have fun. But know that because it is a burden that we're putting on ourselves financially, it's going to be our way or no way, and my parents agree. They understood that it is our own money, it is our own choice, and they want whatever is financially sound for us, most importantly, but what makes us happy and our choice. So I think that's a little difference too. But before I sound off, I think one last point I wanted to say, especially as Asian kids with their parents, learn how to appreciate your parents and learn how to communicate with them. Because when you learn how to communicate with your parents, no matter how good or how bad they may be, in all spectrum, I feel like if you learn how to communicate with your parents, you can communicate with anybody. So take that as what you may, and your parents could be the shittiest people in the world, but if you were still able to learn how to communicate with them in a good or bad way, but just communicate, however you define that, I think you're able to take that skill beyond your parents and, be able to communicate with anyone in the world. So I'm gonna leave it at that.
Cool. Zvon, you got anything you wanted to add to that kind of that marriage and living between, or I don't even remember what the...
Dude, I can't remember what the question was. I was just
remember what the question
what
was.
Steven was saying. Yeah, because he brought up like a lot of good points. Like,
yeah,
I mean, research shows that like less and less people are getting married these days, and more people are getting divorced. Like, whatever. Like I'm hearing both. I can see why. I think it's just... I think lust has driven more of our relationships these days. Just an opinion. I know folks are probably going to bash me, but I see love and marriage and being in a long-term relationship with a partner that you're going to live with and grow with. That's commitment. That's logic. This is why like more and more couples these days are living together and spending like years together before they even think about marriage. And that, like, you don't need a piece of paper to end up like the government's business and your bondage through that piece of paper to define your relationship, right? Because your relationship is like a testament to how you both overcome the obstacles in life. I think that's when love is really put to the test. Your love is really put to the test, and if it's real or not, right? Love them no matter what, unconditionally. It's like, but like these days, at least with younger generations, like it seems more like, oh, I just want someone. I don't want to be with someone. I just want someone. And it also comes with like the social validation, where you post it on your social media, you flaunt it. It's like you leave all these sappy love posts and whatnot. And it makes you feel good temporarily, right? For the short term, until you realize who that person really is. Whether you live with them or in general just grow with them. Like when an obstacle comes in the way between your guys' relationship, or if it even comes for like one of you, like if you both have your own problems to deal with, like how do you both support each other, or do you not? So I think that's something that's being missed, or that's not as common these days, is the logic behind love. And I know like a lot of people believe what they see on social media, Disney, these, you know, sappy love movies and love songs and whatnot, but that's not logical. That's you shouldn't base who you are and who you are as a couple from what you see on like the media or hear from the media. And but other than that, I digress. I agree with like everything that Steven said. That like, do you mesh well with the person? Do you communicate well? Do you like, as cliche as like all those, you know, platitudes sound, it's true. You know, you both could be polar opposites of each other. Like someone could be an introvert, someone could be an extrovert, someone could be um could like certain things, the other person could like different things from that person. Those complete opposites, you would not picture those two together at all. But the values, the virtues, and the disposition that they both share is what's important. Again, it ties back to the logic behind quote unquote true love, thinking long term. You know, a lot of folks that, what I mean, obviously, like I think it's safe to say we've all been through like when we were younger that, you know, you think you love someone, but that's not what it is. You hardly know the person, and that's not even to say like even like when people get married. And I think we could probably all agree on this. Like we've seen or have heard of people getting married, and like for either one of the partners or both, like a switch just flips and they are completely different. One is possessive over the other, it becomes toxic. I don't know. You just don't know what the hell happens, but it's like, you know, like just deep down, it's like something happened after they said I do. Like, um, I don't know. It's just crazy. You put in all this time and effort building a relationship with someone, and it can go as far as like living with them or even having a kid before marriage. But then as soon as they get married, a switch just flips, and that's what sucks. That's what sucks to see. It's like, man, what the hell happened? Is like, did the entitlement get to you? So you like, you know, you just become a different person? Because obviously marriage should be like marrying someone for their character, their values, their virtues, their convictions that they hold strongly to, even though like as human beings we do naturally change and grow over time. But as long as the virtues, the convictions, the values, the beliefs are the same, uh, and the logic behind your love is there, it can definitely last. But it's sad to hear about like uh, just a lot of relationships and marriages failing these days. It really sucks. Um, I digress. I rant, but I mean that what's everything that Steven said just kind of like got brought those things to the surface for me, and things I've always thought about over the years.
Right, Zavon, and everything you said was true. That's why I wrote some notes that I feel like our next episode should expand more on this because I love the topic as well. And obviously, as you heard from my rant, I'm pretty passionate about it. But Zavon, everything you said was 100% true as well. I think the biggest thing, you know, again, my relationship is not perfect. I'm not going to say that, but I think why I believe we work, and why I believe, you know, or I can see that our marriage is not, or our official wedding is not going to change us, is because we're doing it now. You know, we're having the talks now. We're figuring out, we're sharing the convictions now. And not because we are settling for each other, but because we worked at it. And I think the best way to describe it was what you said earlier, Zavon, is I truly believe love is logical. Like when we were young, we thought true love was something fairy tale like, you know. You meet that person, you feel a weird spark that you doesn't, you know, that defies, you know, defies science, and you guys fall in love and happy ever ending. But I think the true testament to love, or the true definition of love, is the hard work you put in it, and it's all logical, you know. And I think that what makes a solid relationship. And maybe we could expand on it next topic, but you know, I enjoy the conversation as well, so we're on the same page.
Yeah. No, I think we tend to do this. We go on tangents and rants and everything about stuff that starts with our topic and then kind of goes into a different topic, which you saw obviously happened here, which is sparking our next episode, maybe expanding on that. We hope that we answered the question. I know there was a couple more points that the listener had sent in. For the respect of time, and this podcast is getting a little bit long, at least this episode is, we are going to kind of cut it at that point. We're gonna save those maybe for another time, another topic. Sorry if you wanted those answered on this episode, you're not getting it. Come back to another one. But I think this obviously sparked something and resonated with us a little bit, kind of in a different way. Obviously, we started talking about the generational differences, but then it kind of led to the point. One of your prompts was, moving in and living with one another before you're married or getting married at a certain age. Obviously, that sent us into a rabbit hole of love and marriage in itself, which is a great topic. Obviously I would love to get some folks in here as well, to some feedback and comments on just like from maybe some folks that are married already. I know we had one of us, Steven, here is engaged. So he's going through that initial process. And I think you make very good points of like, obviously going through all of that stuff now and figuring it out all now prior to your marriage, because, at that point, then I feel like you can enjoy your marriage more once you kind of figure that stuff out beforehand. Whereas people that get married enjoy it a little bit and then they figure out like, oh crap, we are really different in these areas. Like, no, it's just better to get that stuff out of the way. Now, if you know you're going to marry that person, start all of those conversations, start those hard conversations. Obviously, before you even get married, look at financials. That's a huge one as well. On the whole generational thing, I understand. Yes, like traditionally you don't move in with them, but then, we go back even further. You think about it, the people that got married, were their relationships solid? Perfect? No, I don't think they were. I think there was a lot of expectations there as well. Like, you got married, the guy goes to work, the woman stays home, the wife, she's a housewife. She doesn't do anything other than clean the home, cook the meals, and serve the husband, kind of thing. So, looking at it in that scope, way different than today's world. Everyone, back then can view it that way. We're in a different time now. People obviously are our own person. We have our own goals. We have our own ambitions. We have our own lives, essentially. Yes, we're coming together. We're sharing that love in marriage, but also having those tough discussions before we get married and really understanding what we're getting into financially and just everything beforehand. But again, we digress. Just want to thank you for all the listeners. We want to thank, personally for this topic today. Obviously you saw, or you were hearing that it really sparked kind of an interest in our next topic, whether that be next week or in, following weeks. Kind of about the whole love thing. We'll get back to your other questions at some other time. If you really want those answered. If not a big deal. You can just let us know. But thank you for sending in that question. It obviously sparked and resonated with us to where we're still talking about it, and we are going to continue to talk about it in another episode. So at the end of every episode, obviously we challenge our listeners to kind of think about the questions that we talked about today. Think about the comments we made. Bring these questions to your family and your friends or whoever you want to maybe listen to or talk to rather. Maybe you are having a generational difference with your parents. Maybe you are one that's living with someone before you're married or before you're even engaged. You're just living with your partner. Bring this conversation to them. They may not understand, but you also have to consider where they're coming from too. They're coming from an aspect of love. Obviously, they're traditional and they just want what's best for you. And maybe that's not how, they achieved it, but in their head, that's how it's supposed to be done. So show them and have that conversation of different ways. That's the most challenging part. And that's why we're challenging you to it, having those conversations. Like Steven said, some of the best conversations you can have with your parents. You know, you may not like them, you may despise them even if you're in that situation, but you know, if you're an adult, have just a civil conversation, you know, get to know their side of things. You know, there's a narrative that is written for you throughout your life if you're not talking to your parents or whatever. But just have that conversation, have that, you know, sit down and just, you know, it may not be, you know, the super great, but it's one of those things like, you know, it's just get out of the narrative and just have that conversation. You never know what's going to spark from it. You never know why though, you know, they made their decisions the way they did until you fully understand them. So expand, learn, and, you know, again, just talk to them, you know. Like I said, take these questions, maybe having them take a listen to even just this episode with just kind of what we talked about will help them better understand some of our viewpoints. Maybe it might not be yours, but they might hear it from us and they might think like, oh, wow, we didn't consider that side. And maybe you're just having a hard way of expressing it. So let us do that for you if they can listen to an hour of us talking and ranting. But I digress again. Yeah, take that back, have those conversations, have fun, and we'll catch you next week. This is Our Stories, Your Legacy, signing off.